What's up, guys? Sorry, no video for a while. I've been getting over some sickness, and I finally feel well enough to make a video. Tonight's going to be a little bit different than all my other ones. I'm actually going to read for you some fiction that I've written. Get cozy. Get comfortable. I'm going to read for you from this book that I was writing. It's kind of like a horror novel. It's inspired a little bit from like Stephen King, like that sort of deal. And let me know what you think. Give me just a sec here. I gotta get my laptop to load. Okay. I've titled this book Jericho. I'm not really sure why. Okay. The jingle followed by the present thud sound, some hurried steps, and then the whirring refrigerator released its cold as a customer reached for a drink, filled up the previously still air in a station not accustomed to foot traffic. There were no rushes, no lunch hours. Seeing a human at all was just as frightening as coming across a ghoul on Halloween, alone in the dark. It was a small town with one road in and out. On a crisp fall day, Ezra readjusted her posture into a more alert stance as someone approached to pay. He walked kind of funny, she observed. His clothes were old, very old, and it looked like he had given up on hygiene forever ago. She hadn't seen his face yet because he hadn't lifted his gaze any higher than the 45-degree angle it shared with the diamond-patterned tile floor, until she prompted him with a question. "Anything else, sir?" after he deposited a can on the counter with a ceremonious clack. The head slowly rose up. The man stood to his full, intimidating height. She tried not to gasp, but her small face was a canvas filled with fright. The small woman quickly grabbed the can and held it up for him simply to take it. It shook in her hand for a small eternity, and then an immense force ripped it out of her grateful grasp, her fingers instinctively scrunching up in response to the sudden action. He actually made a noise when he had the drink in his hand, but it hardly sounded like a man, more like an it. It left with wide, shuffling steps, like she had seen when he approached the counter moments before. After the door banged shut and the bell bounced off the glass, a chill went up her spine and goosebumps formed all over. She exhaled. Jesus. Ezra didn't hear the sound of an engine, which made her curious enough to look out the window to see if he was still around. She turned to her 12th position and looked in between the row of cigarettes. The coast was clear. Her shoulders dropped and her breathing returned to normal for a second, until one moment she was looking at the pumps outside, and the next... What? Hold on one second. Sorry, my laptop just logged me out. Technology. One moment she was looking at the pumps outside, and the next her head corkscrewed nearly a full 360 until it snapped. It was nearly Halloween. It had forgotten something and came around to finish business. Chapter 1. Saul's blue and white F-150 from the 90s rolled into what looked like an abandoned gas station. He took an exit off the interstate, hoping to find a station before he ran out. He had driven nearly 20 minutes down a one-lane road. He passed a sign that said, "Welcome to Jericho, Texas. Population 405, in faded marking. Friendly-looking place," he mumbled. snapping the column shifter up into park. A sign at the silver old-fashioned pump read, "Pay inside." He looked at the Quick Mart that anchored the lot a short walk away and strode towards the door. The girl at the counter visibly flinched upon seeing a tall man walk her way. Saul noticed. He tried a smile on as he got closer to show he wasn't a threat. "Pack of Reds," he murmured when he got up to the low counter. Her hand hovered around the cartons, which prompted him to specify "shorts" to narrow her selection. "And 40 on 2, ma'am." "Yes, sir," she said in a shy sort of way as she rung him up. She was young, probably her first job. She looked like an Amy, Saul surmised. Her braided hair and checkered red and white flannel shirt with tight denim shorts flattered her figure. She had dimpled cheeks with freckles, a few pimples, and tired eyes. "Been busy today?" "You're the first," she replied dully, definitely not wanting further conversation. 46.53, mister." Saul counted out a few green bills and said to keep the change. He took one last look at the scene and proceeded back out into the heat of the day. It was high noon. Saul had 400 more miles to go before Houston. He looked at his truck and then up at the sun. After the pump read $40 and the fuel clicked off, he slowly replaced the nozzle back into its berth. The middle-aged man sauntered around to the driver's side and stepped up into the cab. Keys were still in the ignition. He twisted to the right, and it chugged. What the heck? A few more tries produced the same noise. For fuck's sake. He reached down to the hood release, and slowly climbed out to assess the situation. A few minutes later, he concluded his battery must have been low. Saul needed a cigarette first. He leaned up against his tailgate and cupped his hands to his mouth, flicking open the metal Zippo lighter and taking a slow drag after a while. There must have been a slow drain somewhere because he knew his battery wasn't that old. His truck certainly was, but she had been in faithful service to him since he bought it more than 2 decades ago. Saul didn't have a phone. He was an old-fashioned man with a sister and mom spread across the country and no friends really. No woman in the picture to worry after him. After he put his cigarette out, Saul walked back to the gas station and popped inside to see if they had a phone he could use. "Car trouble?" Amy asked. Saul joked, "Nah, just forgot to get my winning scratch off." "Yeah, car trouble." "Say, you got a phone I could use?" The attendant passed a judging stare at him for not having a cell phone in the 21st century. "Sure, one moment." She went back and retrieved a cordless phone and handed it to him. "Be quick about it." Saul nodded. He then thought of another question. "You got a phone book?" "Mister, it's 2018. What's a phone book?" The man laughed. "Well, could you tell me if there's a tow truck in this town or anyone kind enough to come and give me a jump?" She shook her head. "No?" Amy pulled out a phone and said, "Technology. Learn how to use it." "Yeah, sure. Maybe you can give me a lesson after we get my truck running again." "My boyfriend has a car. I'll text him to swing by and get you going." Saul graciously bowed his head and thanked her profusely. "What's your name, miss?" "Ashley." Close, he thought, and smiled to himself. "You're a good woman, Ashley. You'll make your boyfriend happy." She blushed and avoided eye contact, popping a hip and raising her left foot backwards and tapping it on the floor with her tiptoes a few times to dump the nervous energy out. "Well, I'll be waiting out in my truck. Tell him no hurry. Whatever he's doing, let him finish." Ashley nodded and replied, "Okay." She raised her phone, and the thumbs went to typing another message. "Kids and their technology," Saul mumbled. Leaving the station again, he felt truly dated even though he hadn't even made it to his 5th decade yet. His hairy hand felt for the bulge in his back pocket. Out popped another cigarette. The metal clicked again. A few puffs of smoke belched into the blue Texas sky with the strong smell of tobacco and tar. "Might get through the whole pack before Romeo arrives," he said with the smoking stick in between his dry lips. Saul opened the door to his truck and sat sideways, his legs dangling out. It was a hot fall day. He decided to bake in his truck with the windows down while he waited for a rescue. Saul was supposed to be in Houston by the end of the day to meet up with an old friend from college. He hadn't seen his buddy in years, and it was a good excuse to leave his 9 to 5 and humble digs in Oklahoma. Saul was an economics major and wound up selling life insurance for a living. He hoped his annuities he had racked up would be enough to live off of and retire at a decent age with his golden retriever, Jacob. Beers, hunting, and going for long walks with man's best friend sounded great to the tired traveler who now had time to think about the big picture while he waited for what would happen in the present. After nearly 2 hours of heavy smoking and sweating through his cotton t-shirt, it looked like help had arrived. A cloud of dust grew closer, as presumably Romeo was approaching to help Saul. As it got closer, Saul recognized it to be an old Civic. "Hope you didn't forget to bring cables," he grunted, putting out his cigarette. The little red car had a cracked bumper and faded clear coat, gave it a weathered appearance, but it had a working battery, and that's all that mattered. The young man stepped out and went to his trunk. In his hand was a yellow cord dangled with red and black clips on both ends. Saul went up to shake his hand and apologize for the inconvenience. "It's fine, man," Romeo said dismissively. "You don't want to be stuck here when the sun goes down." "Oh, why's that?" "You don't know the legend?" The young man asked, a bit surprised, assuming the stranger to have heard what made the little town of 405 Souls famous. Maybe 404 now, after another victim fell to the clutches of evil the other day at that very gas station the two men stood at. Saul smiled and joked, "Does your town have an American Psycho or something?" He referenced the movie. Romeo actually chuckled, but then grew tense the next instant. He took off his baseball cap and held it to his chest. He paused. "It's worse than the movies." Saul scanned the horizon, took one last look back to where the interstate would be, and said, "Shall we get started then?" eager to get off the present topic. Suddenly, he was holding out his cigarette carton with one sticking out and a simple question spoken he knew the answer to. "Smoke?" Romeo eagerly accepted, and Saul held the lighter out to the accepting white receiver already between the recipient's teeth. He puffed a few times and smiled. "Let's get back on the road, mister." Saul nodded earnestly. "Pop the hood?" Romeo asked. Before long, he snaked the cables from one battery to another and sent juice to the depleted F-150's energy cells. Its battery rose past 12 volts, and soon Saul twisted the keys, this time with more success. It cranked and turned over with a mighty roar. The truck idled finally, gave him hope. "Good luck on your journey," Romeo said, disconnecting the jumper cables. "Don't forget to come back and visit us." "Thanks a lot, kid. Sorry about all the trouble." Saul watched Romeo go into the gas station to be with his girlfriend. He didn't watch for too long, though. His thoughts were already back on the road, where he would eventually be in a number of hours if his truck could remain reliable. He kicked his tires and knocked on wood. Everything would be okay from here on out. Saul turned on the radio and played some Led Zeppelin. His fingernails tapped the wheel as he got going back towards the interstate. He looked one last time in the rearview mirror as he passed by the Jericho sign and thought about the boogeyman character Romeo had described. Saul involuntarily shivered. Just then the darndest thing happened. The corniest plot twist that he expected to happen in horror movies, except this was in real life, the real deal. Ever since he had left the gas station, his eyes almost never left the gauges on the dashboard. He feared another breakdown. It's like his fear invited chaos, and his engine bay was the willing participant to his Jericho nightmare. The temperature spiked, and sooner than later, white smoke billowed from the radiator. Saul's blood pressure needled in the same direction as his car's redlining in the too hot to operate zone. He pulled over to the shoulder in defeat and threw the shifter up in park in disgust. You don't want to be stuck here after the sun goes down, replayed in his consciousness, like the foreboding omen to the kind of night he would presumably have. Fuck! He yelled. No cars passed by, and it was a 4-mile walk back where he came from, he estimated. Fuck! He repeated himself, popping his door open and contemplating the next move. Does this shit actually happen in real life to people? He asked the only living thing that may have heard the man who bemoaned his circumstances. But the vultures kept on pecking away at their find on the side of the road near Saul's truck. Great! Terrific! The man in distress smacked the wrinkles and dust out of his faded blue jeans before he released the hood once again. He stared at a familiar engine. His eyes burned as the steam came out in gusts. Saul held his undershirt up to his face and swatted at the smoke to clear the air. The smell of coolant hit him straight in the sinuses. Probably a broken hose, he surmised, as the smoke dissipated and his untrained eyes that didn't know what to look for analyzed the picture. Hope Jericho has a hotel, he laughed half-heartedly. Then he thought about his friend who may have been 3 to 4 hours from him. He didn't even know the guy's number and didn't have a phone. His friend's contact information was in the Rolodex at home, where it wouldn't do him a whole lot of good in his hour of need. Saul looked back towards the direction of the gas station and thought of Ashley. Man, I need technology. This may have been the first time he had wanted a cell phone. People for years had tried to convert him to no avail. If he didn't get hacked to pieces by the town monster and make it back to his quiet life in Oklahoma, Saul would stop at a phone store first thing. But right now, he would try to walk back to town with a couple $100. On the bright side, he packed a little insurance in his glove box. He quickly retrieved and tucked into his waistband and the small of his back 7 rounds of ammo. Saul was a good shot, but he hoped he wouldn't need it against the legend of Jericho. Saul was thirsty after his 4-mile hike. His feet dragged a bit, but at last he saw the shape of the gas station up ahead, its triangular-shaped building, the 2 shiny pumps, and the price sign that loomed on the edge of the property but didn't give away the surprise of how much unleaded fuel was that day on its numberless billboard. The red Civic was still there. Saul felt better about everything already. Loverboy had decided to swoon his girlfriend after all and make time pass for her on her dead-end job. The doorbell rattled against the glass, and in strode the new local. The couple had indeed been mingling. Ashley blushed as Saul stopped with a large grin on his ruddy face as he enjoyed a fleeting scene of Romeo macking on his girlfriend behind the counter. Saul had his hands on his hips. You lost your way? Romeo asked. We don't sell maps here, you know, Ashley teased the cell phoneless man. I think my radiator might have sprung a leak, I'm afraid. I'll be needing a place to stay in town. Anyone you know who can fix cars at a reasonable price? I can take a look at it, sir. I help my dad. He's the only guy that wrenches in Jericho. Great! Terrific! This time he was genuinely saying those words and not using them as a sorry song to the vultures that watched his breakdown on the side of the road a little earlier. Here, why don't I tell my dad where you are and have him bring his truck to give you a tow? You have one of them smartphones too? Saul asked the young man, knowing full well the answer. Romeo looked confused by the question and shrugged it off, like he didn't hear Saul. He then pulled out the screen and pecked a message on the glass. Gotta get me one of those. I finally see the use, Saul quipped. A few hours later, Romeo's dad came in his own time in a similarly beat-down pickup that hardly looked capable of hauling Saul's disabled one. He stepped out of the small crew cab and onto the asphalt, his boots being the most striking feature of an otherwise unremarkable appearance. Having car trouble, mister? He reached out to shake Saul's hand. Sure am. Name's Lester, Romeo's dad said while gripping Saul's much softer hand with his own blackened mechanic's mitt. Saul, good to meet you. What seems to be the trouble? I don't reckon I have the faintest idea, Saul admitted. Well then, why don't we have a look? The insurance salesman from Oklahoma dutifully pulled the hood latch for the town's mechanic, and within a couple of minutes of and uh-huhs, he reasoned the answer to be forthcoming. One of your O-rings has gone bad on a coolant line underneath the intake manifold, Saul, Lester explained in layman's terms. Common on these older F-150s. Can happen at any time. How soon could you get me back on the road? The mechanic smiled with the sun casting a shadow on his face. It's a quick fix, but I'm afraid I'm behind on my other customers' cars since I'm the only game in town. So tomorrow, Thursday, I have no place to stay. Jericho isn't where you want to break down, Saul. Have you heard the legend? Yes, and I'd rather not stick around to find out if it's true or not. Saul nervously laughed. And that's the end of it. That's what I've written so far. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I know I'm not the best of readers, but yeah, that's the first couple of chapters I've written to my horror novel. You guys think I should keep writing? Would you be interested in hearing more of my horror novel? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys in the next video, okay? Take it easy.